Hi, this is James. Welcome back to the Superfast PPC Web Savvy combo of PPC Masterclass with Mike Rhodes, and I'm James Schramko. So we're going to kick off with week 2, and I'm going to hand over to Mike Rhodes, and I'll moderate questions today. So we'll keep it dynamic. If you've got questions, type them into the chat pad. I will interrupt Mike or wait for his pause, and then I'll ask the questions on your behalf. So let's get rolling with Mike Rhodes.
Sounds good. Thank you, James. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming along again. So we are into week 2, and this is going to be about our starting keywords. So our overall keyword research, but I really want to emphasize the point that these are just our starting keywords. No AdWords account is ever completely done. It's just the starting point. I'll be on that point a few times tonight. So let's get into it, and I'm going to start off, as promised, with some Q&A from last week, which is obviously all about your dashboard and your persona. And so a couple of screenshots here from the Basecamp. So for you guys, now I can't actually see the right-hand side of that screen, so this could be interesting. Mick is asking, so you've determined that your target market has, let's say, a 60-40 split. Would you have one or two or several personas? Definitely. You've probably got one core persona, but it's absolutely fine to have another 1 or 2 or even 3 just to cover those sort of secondary markets. The more detail you can get there, the more you understand your market, the better. You may have to help me out here, James, because I literally cannot see the right-hand side of my screen. If 2 personas, would you have 60% of your ad groups and keywords targeted something, or if multiple, how would that be reflected? Well, so let's do the male-female thing.
You're saying for a male audience there, that was what's right there.
Okay, thank you. Most people aren't going to differentiate, or let me put it another way, you're not going to be able to tell if they're male or female generally by the keywords that they use. If you know that you've got a big skew one way or the other, then you might use certain language, which really is going on to answer questions 3 and 4 here. You might use different language, different wording in your ad to appeal to that market, but most of the time you're not really going to be able to tell just from the keyword itself, at least not in most markets. So point 3, how do you or can you serve a male ad when a guy is searching? Demographic targeting in Google AdWords sucks. It's a technical term, it sucks. So really, don't use demographic targeting in Google AdWords. It's not worth trying. There's so few at this point in time. So, you know, August 2011. Facebook targeting, obviously much, much better. So the one way that you can do this, and we touched on this very briefly in the retargeting webinar, and I'm going to talk about this more in week 7, is if you have different Facebook ads showing to different people. So let's say you've got 2 ads, one for the guys, one for the girls, and you bring those people to 2 separate landing pages, then obviously you're going to theme that landing page very differently. And at that point, you can cookie those people and set up 2 different remarketing lists. If remarketing doesn't make any sense to you yet, don't worry, it will do when we get to week 7. At that point, then you can remarket to those 2 separate lists and show guy ads to the guys and girl ads to the girls. But just on your general Google search ads or your general display ads before you start doing remarketing, really you can't show the guy ads to the guys. Don't bother with the demo targeting in AdWords. Now, your question about empathy. I think we'll talk about that more when we get to next week when we talk about writing great ads. But absolutely use that in the ad wording itself. I think that's probably all I'll say for now. Likewise with number 5 there, features versus benefits. Really, the only proper answer I can give you at that point, Nick, is you got to test. But generally speaking, benefits will outdo features. I'm just going to test that you can hear me there still, Nick. I just got go to webinar messages popping up.
Type in the chat pad, please, if you can hear Mike.
If you can hear me,
all fine.
Beautiful. Sorry. All right. Yeah, generally benefits are going to work because, and we'll talk about this next week, it's that whole, everyone's favorite radio station thing, WIIFM, what's in it for me? We tend to be more attracted to stuff where we can clearly see the benefit to us rather than the feature of the product or the service itself. And last one is ignoring CPC. Is it always best to be number one in terms of your ad position? This is. Generally, I don't really want to be position number one. Generally speaking, I've found over lots and lots of testing over years in different markets that generally the second ad tends to get me the best ROI. Now, the one caveat to that, and we'll talk about this later in the course, but there is a new dimension that we talked about last week, top versus side report within your account, and what that's revealed to us is the massive difference in CPC, but also then in traffic and in sales and conversions. So generally, I would say now, you do want to be in those top 3 premium positions. Now, there won't always be 3. Sometimes there's only 1 or 2, but you do want to be in those top premium positions, assuming that your quality is good enough to get you there. So that would be my preference. And that's a very general rule, Nick. There are some markets where we just find better ROI maybe halfway down the right-hand side because it's just too expensive to try and get in those top 1 or 2, 3 spots. And the ignoring CPC bit, I'd say, well, I probably wouldn't ignore CPC. I'd be looking at, does my cost per acquisition, my cost per lead make sense? If it doesn't make sense, drop your bids and show your ads further down the page. If you can't make money with ads in position 6 or 7, you're unlikely to make money with ads in position 1, 2, or 3. So I hope that answers all your questions, Nick. Thank you for chucking that in Basecamp. If I haven't answered anything as you'd like it, then chuck it back in Basecamp, and I'll get to it. Now, I must apologise. I've been a little absent from Basecamp this week. I've just been on a 6-day holiday with my wife and my little baby girl. So we only got back literally an hour ago. So I will be much more present in Basecamp this week, which is a good thing because I think we're going to have quite a few questions about keyword research this week. So another one here that came in from Paul about landing pages. I will talk about this later on, Paul. I'll throw you a little note in the next couple of days. But very briefly on this, yes, optimized press is great. Does Google frown upon this stuff? Yeah, you don't want one-page wonder landing pages. You don't want a landing page where the only option is I must give you personally identifiable information, PII, Google calls it, i.e. an email address, a phone number, etc. You don't want a page where I have to give you that information or leave the site. That's what Google really doesn't like. Google likes you to show that you're offering value and to show people a bit of a taster, if you like, of what they're going to get after they opt in, after they give you that email address or the phone number or whatever. So think of it more as a squeeze site rather than a squeeze page. Maybe it's a 10, 20 page site, a few blog posts about us, contact us, privacy policy. I'll go into this in more detail when we get landing pages, but those things are pretty key. But give them more value, give them more content, more good stuff, and by all means have that optimized press theme so that you can have that opt-in box on the right-hand side of every page. But yeah, don't have the one-page wonder. Another
Excellent.
From
Nick said you answered his question perfectly. And there was an additional question about what about being number one for mobile where there is no side?
Very good distinction. Very good distinction. Yes, I do at this point in time want to be number one for mobile because there's generally 1 or 2 ads at the top of mobile and then generally another 2 or 3 at the bottom underneath the organic results. But because the screen is so small, because people are even less likely to scroll, and I wish I had some stats on that, but I don't, just anecdotally, I know from my personal way of using mobiles, I'm much less likely to scroll. So that screen real estate becomes really, really important on the mobile. And it's so cheap at the moment. So few people are writing specific ads for mobile devices. You can target down to the phone. So you know that they're an iPhone user seeing that particular ad. So if you can have special deal for iPhone users in your ad, you're going to get a reasonably high click-through rate. And you can still have all the other funky stuff that we're going to talk about later on, like site links and click-to-call only ads. Again, if that doesn't mean anything yet, don't worry, it will do in a few weeks. But yeah, short answer, get on with it. Number one, on mobile, very good idea. All right.
Okay, Mike, would you recommend having the opt-in details on every landing page?
There's a couple of schools of thought that, yeah, I generally will have a simple opt-in box, and generally I'll only have email only if I can get away with it. I don't think really these days you need to ask first name, last name, mum's middle name, cat's favourite colour, all the other stupid questions that people ask. Generally, and I'll talk about this in week 5, I like a 2-step process, but on the landing page I'll only ask for an email address. I may then on the next page ask them for a bit more information. Cialdini talks about this, commitment and consistency kick in. Once I've taken that first little step, then they're much more likely to take the next baby step. So maybe answering the next question, which might be, what's your mobile number, or for asking for a physical address, rather than having all of that in the initial form. But yeah, generally, if it makes sense, we'll put the opt-in form on every page. Even, and this is a sneaky one, but it can work, even on the privacy page. Because if people are that detailed that they want to actually go and read your privacy policy, then why not put a form on that page for them as well? Make it easy. I think that answers that one. Impression share, question for Nick. What lost impression share percentage would cause you to try and improve a campaign? Yes, it is going to be very different depending on budgets and revenue. Couple of things. So there's 2 ways you can lose impression share. There's budget and there's rank. If you're losing impression share because of budget, and you know that your account or that particular campaign is a profitable one, every dollar you tip in makes you 10 or 20 or 37 or whatever it is, then you shouldn't really be losing impression share to budget. You should increase your budget as high as you can, really. If you know it's making you money, and I know that people have marketing budgets and they have to set prices at this, yeah, we'll go there another time. But if it's making you money, I'd be increasing my budget. If you're losing impression share due to rank, then obviously rank is, well, we haven't talked about quality score yet, but rank is a combination of your quality and your bid. And so it's really just a signpost. It's not saying, you must fix this, but it's a signpost telling you that one of those 2 things is probably a bit low. So it's really just more investigation required. Maybe you need to go and clean up some low quality score keywords. Maybe you need to work on your ad copy to improve click-through rate. Maybe you need to bid a little bit more, particularly if you've got keywords that are making you money. So it is going to be a very much a it depends answer. Sorry, Nick. But hopefully that answers your question. And
yep, he did have
go on. Sorry.
He had a follow-on question too about would mobile targeting be solely its own campaign?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, because your stats... So the reason I have different campaigns, first and foremost, is because my stats are going to be very different. So, for years we've talked about separating search campaigns and display campaigns. Obviously, they're very different types of people. Again, we'll talk about that more later in the course, but whenever you've got big differences in your campaigns, let's say you've got Australia and the US, your stats are going to be very different. i.e., the average click's going to be higher in the States, your average position is probably going to be lower, people are going to respond differently to different words, you're going to have different keywords and different ad copy for those different markets. Whenever you've got big differences between campaigns, and obviously desktop versus mobile is very different, yes, separate them out into different campaigns. Just so that at a glance you can see average position, 1.1 for your mobile campaign, excellent, everything's on track. And this slide's just a thank you to Paul in Basecamp. He's detailed some of the books and found some links to them, some of the books I mentioned last week, and even a link to Perry's Tactical Triangle. So I thought I'd pop them on the screen just so for you guys that aren't in Basecamp, you've got all the links and you'll have those in the PDF at the end of this call, as soon as I get around to sending it to James, which will be later on tonight. I can't remember what that slide says. What's the third word on the right, James?
CID. You're asking them for your account, the account, if you want to hook them up.
Yep. If you want me to have a look inside your AdWords account, assuming that you've already got one running, send the CID to Emily, as per the note in Basecamp, and we'll get that hooked up to our agency account. Thank you for those of you that have already sent that in. All right, so starting keywords. Again, I'm going to emphasize this again, that your AdWords account is never finished, or your client's AdWords account. These keywords that you're going to discover over the next week are just a starting point. There's a couple of things with AdWords. Obviously, the better you get, the cheaper it gets. As you discover more and more about your market, as you write your ads, as you refine your keyword list as you go, and you're going to do two things with this keyword list. You're going to both remove some keywords as you go. You're going to find that some keywords that you thought would be good aren't good in terms of whatever you're measuring, hopefully sales and leads and cost per lead and cost per sale. So if they're too expensive, then you're going to get rid of them. But you're also going to add to this list as you go. And we'll talk about that particularly in week 8 when we talk about ongoing management. But we touched on it last week, that search query report. So the actual queries, the actual terms that your prospects use to find you. That is absolute gold. Not enough people talk about this with respect to AdWords, but that search query report is where you're going to find lots of new keyword ideas. So that's this week's mind map. And again, as per last week, I'm going to break it down and just show you the key bits that are most important to look at. So again, before we start, let's just look at the big picture first. Perfection is a myth. There is no perfect AdWords account. There is no perfect keyword list, and there is no perfect number of keywords in each ad group. That's probably the question we get asked the most. How many keywords should go in an ad group, or how many keywords should go in an account? Well, a couple of points. And of course, this is all on the right-hand side of the screen. Think like your audience, and as we touched on at the end of last week, use their language, not yours. This is not about you selling. This is about them buying. So match your language. Use that persona that you've built. And of course, you have built it, haven't you? And you've done that homework and you've done that research. Get into their heads and use that empathy. So our goal here is to create small groups of keywords, I'll talk about that in a second, that your ideal client might use. And again, it's a starting point. Google is going to do the work. If we set this up the right way and structure our account the right way, we'll be able to discover new keywords over time. Now, some of those keywords are going to be a big signpost saying, actually, you shouldn't be bidding on this word. We're going to have that become a negative keyword, and we're going to stop showing ads for that. And I'll explain that a little bit today, but more in week 5 when we talk about quality score. And we're going to build this account based on data, not guesswork. We're going to look at the numbers and let the numbers tell us which direction we need to go in. So it's just a starting point. And before we get into some of the tools that we're going to use, really important to understand the different types of keyword. Now, if you already know this, fantastic, but this is worth going over again. I will make the point again, search query versus keyword. So the search query is what they type, the keyword is what lives in the account. Keyword, you have a number of options of the type of keyword that you use within your account. An exact match keyword is exactly what it says. If they type in, if their search query exactly matches your keyword, then that will trigger your ad to show. And I've got an example screen next that will show you graphically some examples of these. It's very precise, but obviously it's very limited in terms of the volume. Only people that type in exactly the exact 2 or 3 or 4 words that you might have in that keyword, only those people are going to see your ad. So using phrase match, so the example might be, say, tennis shoes. If I bid on the phrase of tennis shoes, then all the people that use that phrase in their search query can see my ad. Red tennis shoes on sale, but not tennis size 10 shoes, because that isn't using the phrase tennis shoes. Modified broad and broad, I'll talk about on the next slide. And negative keywords we use to stop showing our ad. And again, we'll talk about that in depth in week 5, and I'll touch on that again tonight as we go. So here's a way to picture this, and this is the slide that Google used that I've nicked from them. So bottom right corner, let's start with exact, because this is really important to understand. This is probably the single biggest mistake I see in accounts that have been set up by people, is they tend to only have broad match keywords in. And as we saw last week, you remember the Verizon example and all of those different search queries that got matched to the broad keyword Verizon. It was a mess. There were all sorts of different search queries in there. And so if you now expand that by 50 or 100 keywords, you can imagine the mess that people get into. And that's where you find people paying 10, 15, 20 bucks per click in markets where they should be paying $1 because they're actually showing ads to the wrong people. So exact match keywords. Those square brackets around the keyword denote exact match, and that will only show ads to people that type in exactly that, formal shoes. Phrase match, like we just said, will match the phrase, but not a search query that doesn't have that phrase in it. Modified broad has only been around, oh, probably a few months now, probably almost a year now, but this is what most people, this is what broad should be. This is what broad was way, way, way back until about 2-3 years ago when Google changed it and made lots more money. Plus formal, plus shoes, what that is saying to Google is that those two words, formal and shoes, must appear in the search query or very, very close variations thereof in order to show your ad. So the examples you can see on the screen, I won't bother reading them to you. So that's obviously much more broad. You haven't got to think of every single phrase that your prospect could use in every single order, because phrase match is going to limit you. Modified broad, I hope I'm explaining this well, I always do this one. It's a difficult concept to get your head around. Modified broad, plus or plus shoes, those two keywords can appear anywhere in the search query, or very, very close variations of those two words. The one up above, so what that's saying, because you haven't got the plus sign in front of formal, but you have got plus shoes, that's going to match things like evening shoes. Because Google's going to look at that and say, well, the person typing in evening shoes, it's kind of similar to formal shoes, so I'll show your ad. Now, you may or may not want that. I suggest you don't, particularly for this campaign. And broad match matches everything. So I would not, for your first campaign, I would not use broad match at all. It just, Google wanders off on far too many tangents that you can't control, and is going to start showing your ad for some of those examples there. And that's Google's example, remember. So I would suggest that some of those tangents are going to be even more tenuous than the examples that you see before you. So what I'm going to suggest is you either, if you want to keep things simple, just use phrase match. If you want to give it a bit of a nudge, and as long as you're going to manage the account on an ongoing basis and look at your search query report on probably a weekly basis, then you can use modified broad. And the way we set up, again, there is no perfect way, but the way we set things up when we're running this for client accounts in the agency, for every single keyword that we pick, we'll have one ad group, and we'll put modified broad and phrase and exact match versions of that keyword in that one ad group as a starting point. Now that may change over time, and I'll talk about some of the reasons another time, probably week 8 when we talk about ongoing management. But as a starting point, we put the modified broad, the phrase, and the exact match of each keyword. So it's the same keyword, 3 different types in each ad group. For us, that's the best way to manage. Again, there is no perfect way. So I'm going to give you a couple of different examples of how many keywords you should have and other ways to set it up. Glenn Livingston, very, very smart man when it comes to Google AdWords. He has a concept called, well, let me, before I go into that, any questions about phrase matching, James, on the chat there? Did I butcher that completely?
We've only had compliments about how well it's been explained, that it's the best explanation they've seen so far. My
Everyone's
personal
right.
favourite is the figure not drawn to scale comment down the bottom of that page.
Yeah.
But that's safe to say we can proceed.
All right. Yeah. That broad match rectangle there, that would be a lot bigger in comparison to the other ones. It's safe to say. Cool. All right. So the bullseye keyword concept that Glenn came up with. He is an advocate of going very, very deep into a market, really understanding it, but starting very, very, very small. Now, if you're going to start selling your own product, that might be a way you go, but if you're setting up a client account, they're going to be a little disappointed when you've only got 6 keywords in their account that they've just paid you to set up. And that's what Glenn recommends setting up, your bullseye keyword. If you had, never mind 30 seconds in an elevator to tell me what your business is, if you had a second, if you had to pick one keyword that explained to me the best you could who you're targeting, who your perfect prospect is, what is that bullseye keyword? And Paul, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to use your first aid kit market as a bit of an example as we go through tonight. I would imagine your bullseye keyword would be emergency first aid kits. So what's that one keyword right bang in the middle? And then Glenn suggests picking another 5 around that, and that's your starting point. As I say, for me, I think particularly for clients, it's small and too limiting. So we can go to the other end of the scale, the other extreme, and huge hat tip here to a guy called Richard Baxter. Steve Owens, who I think many of you know, was recently at SEO Moz in Seattle, fine-tuning his already excellent SEO skills. And Richard gave a talk there on massive keyword research. Now, he was talking about it from an SEO point of view, and his site is certainly geared that way, seogadget.co.uk. But some of the stuff that he uses, it has definitely influenced the tools that we've built internally. And if you want to go check it out, for bonus points, if you really want to, have a look on SlideShare. I think it actually got featured on the homepage of SlideShare a day or 2 ago. But Richard Baxter, SEO Moz, something like keyword research, mass keyword research, something like that. Some great tools. You don't need to buy this tool. A bunch of different tools tonight, but if you really want to go ballistic, have a look at that. He advocates, thousands and thousands of pounds of keywords. So what I'm suggesting is somewhere in the middle, and I'm going to suggest that with your first campaign, you probably want to pick something like 50 to 200 keywords. If you're doing this for a client, then maybe that's going to be a little bit bigger, maybe 500 or a couple of thousand keywords. But gone are the days where you pick 50,000 keywords, chuck them all up against the wall, see what sticks, and then go from there. And the reason for that is it's going to be very, very hard to find 50,000 quality, relevant keywords in your market. So have that concept of bullseye keyword in your head, but rather than just go maybe 1 ring out on the bullseye, maybe go 2 or 3 rings out on the bullseye and try and find words that are very similar and complementary and relevant to your market. But as a ballpark starting point, probably 50 to 200 keywords. And the way I'm going to suggest setting that up is 1 keyword per ad group with whatever match types you want to use for you. So if you want to be a bit more conservative, just have 1 phrase match keyword per ad group. The way we do it is mod, broad, phrase, exact, and we manage from there. It is entirely up to you. Perfection is a myth. Guys, there is no perfect way to do this. And it's this simple. So all of the tools that we're going to use tonight, I would suggest you set up an Excel spreadsheet. The reason I suggest that is so that you can cut and paste this later on. If you want to use a pen and paper, that's wonderful too. I love pen and paper. I make a lot of my notes on paper still. James is training me. I'm using Evernote more and more. And if you're going to be an AdWords whiz, you've got to get your head around Excel. There's going to be so much that you're going to do in Excel and some other tools. But I would start with your keyword research, getting everything down into Excel, and I would break your initial keywords up by theme. Again, this is impossible for me to tell you what is going to be right for you because every single market is different. But a theme is going to be similar keywords, a similar product, a similar service. I'll try and give some examples as we go through. And the reason you're going to break them up into themes is because if you want to be lazy, or if your preference is to have more than one keyword in an ad group, then you could have an ad group for column A there. You could have one ad group for theme 1 and include all of those different keywords in. That's fine. You know, a lot of people still teach 10 to 20 keywords per ad group. Again, there is no perfect answer. I prefer one keyword per ad group. James, I know when you went to Google a couple of weeks ago, they talked a little bit about this. I don't know if you want to jump in and share some thoughts on this, but I think that if you have too many keywords in one ad group, you run the risk of the ad that people see not being as relevant to them as it could be. Yes, it's a little bit more work to manage, but if you think back to last week, we talked about the 80-20 rule. You know, if you figure out what your top 20% of ad groups are, the ones that get you 80% of your leads, and it's probably a 95-5 rule within AdWords. There's probably 5% of your ad groups that send you 95% of your leads. If you just manage that 5% of ad groups and don't worry about the rest very often, you're probably going to be fine. So yes, it potentially adds more work for you, but in reality, I think it's better to have that extra level of control.
Yeah, I think when I was at Google, they were talking about having 5 or 10 keywords per group. They weren't really subscribing to the one keyword per group philosophy, but I think they were dealing with very basic level people, and it's entry starting point. This is people who maybe haven't really done anything at all and they're just getting started.
Yeah.
When I was doing my big campaigns, and I'm talking about $7,000 or $8,000 a day's worth of sales, I ended up with about 10 keywords that were making me all the money, and it was most definitely one keyword per group, and it was so specific, and it went to its own landing page per keyword.
Yep.
And it was highly relevant, and that was the only way that I could compete. And that actually whittled down from a big list of several hundred keywords. I ended up with just a handful that were the money makers, and I tracked to individual keyword level.
The keywords in that sentence were ended up with. You didn't start with 10 keywords, you tested hundreds, worked and worked and worked and worked at it, and ended up with the ones that made the most money. And generally we'll do something similar, particularly with client accounts, where we may not delete keywords that aren't making much money, or where the ROI is just a little bit above 100%. We'll generally end up leaving those in the account, but we'll spend 80, 90, 95% of our effort, of our time, optimizing the stuff that has the high ROI and the higher volume. All right, so let's get into it and talk about some tools to find those keywords that you're going to start with. The Google Keyword Tool. You're probably already familiar with it. You've probably already had a play. For your first campaign, this could be a bit controversial, but I reckon that's all you need for your first campaign when you're just starting out. If you use it well, if you dive into it and don't just spend 5 minutes looking at the most obvious keywords that it gives back, you can still set up a really good campaign using just the data in the Google Keyword Tool. 2 caveats. One is you then must use the search query report on an ongoing basis to discover more keywords to add to your account and obviously knock out those keywords that aren't working as well for you. And remember that not every single keyword in the world is going to be included in Google's Keyword Tool, particularly since last year's update. They now, which they've rolled back a little bit, so they changed it, they updated it, they massively reduced the number of keywords that it gave you. They said they were only showing keywords that had high commercial intent. Everybody kicked and screamed and said, you're a bunch of idiots, this is useless now, so they rolled it back. most of the way back to where it was before. But you have to remember that not every keyword in there not every keyword is going to be in there, and also that the stats that they give you are not going to be perfect. Perfection is a myth. So I'm sure you've used it. This is what it looks like these days. And I just want to run through, and I'm going to do this in slides so that you have the PDF to refer to. If I go to a live demo, it's not going to work for the people that are just listening to the audio or that only have the slides. So I think it's probably better to do it this way. Happy to have some feedback about that, particularly you guys in Basecamp. If you want me to do more live demos, we can. I think GoToWebinar should cope with it okay. But for now, I'll do it this way. I think it'll work better for all of us. So the advanced options and filters, what do I generally use in here? For most of our clients, probably 80% are Australian businesses. So I will always set, or usually set the location to Australia. If I'm trying to come up with more ideas, if I've got a bit stuck and I'm looking for more ideas, I might set this to all countries or maybe just to the States, because that's where most of the data is. You know, there's so much more search volume in the States that you're probably going to get some other ideas there. But generally, I'll set it to Australia, the language to English, and the show ideas and statistics for desktop and laptop devices. So you can set that to mobile if you want. I generally don't add the filter, and I generally don't include the adult ideas, because most of our clients, well, actually all of our clients, are not in adult markets. We've had a number of people approach us for that, and we say no, we don't want to work in those markets. The columns that I turn on when I'm doing this are the following. And the two important ones there really are the local monthly searches and the approximate CPC. I don't generally worry about the others. And so this is what it looks like when you add in a word or phrase at the top. Now, when you're doing this, there's a couple of ways you could do it. You can either start with something fairly specific, and I'm going to use Paul here as a bit of an example. So you could start with a fairly specific keyword, like I mentioned before, something like emergency first aid kit. But the more specific the starting point, the less data, the less ideas you're going to get. So I would suggest starting with something fairly broad. In this case, I've used a two-word phrase, first aid. Now, while I'm talking about keyword length or search query length, for your first campaign, just as a general rule of thumb, I would suggest not having any one-word keywords in your account. See this a lot, again, in accounts that people have set up. If they're selling wine cellars, then they might have the single keyword wine and the single keyword sellers and some other stuff, maybe even cheese, because cheese goes with wine. So I'll show ads about wine to people that are searching for cheese, and I'll try and persuade them to buy a wine cellar. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. You generally want to be, and this again, it's a sliding scale. You want to be specific, but not too specific, and you want to be a little bit broad, but not too broad. You know, it's the whole Goldilocks thing of trying to get it just right. The reason I would start with something a little bit broader, and here I've used first aid as the example, is that I'm going to get a lot of ideas for these tangents that Google might go off on. And so if my keyword was first aid, second example down there under keyword ideas, first aid training. If I'm selling first aid kits, I probably don't want to show my ad to someone typing in first aid training, at least not when I'm starting out, because most people searching for first aid training are looking for training stuff and training courses. They're not looking to buy kits. Yes, they might need one, but they're not looking to buy one right now. See, this is where it gets subjective. And really this comes with experience, and about, I don't know, 7.5 years at this point of experience would tell me that that's probably not a keyword that I want to start with if I'm selling first aid kits. You can see already from my very first example that this is going to be a tricky thing. If you're in Basecamp, I know that you're going to send in some questions. Please do. I will answer them over the weekend and try and give you as much feedback as I can and review some keyword lists if you want to send them through. So by going off on these tangents, what I'm doing is already in my head and probably in my Excel spreadsheet is getting an idea for some of these terms which are eventually going to be negative keyword terms. And on the top left here, if I go back another slide, on the left-hand side here, you can see an include and an exclude terms. If you use Market Samurai, this is very, very similar to the Market Samurai setup. So exclude terms, what I've done here is just as I was flicking through this initial list, I found a few terms here that I thought I wouldn't want to show my ads for that. So I start to add them to exclude terms. What this does is give me two things. I can export this list later on, and that's already giving me some initial negative keywords. And again, if negative keywords confuse you, don't worry, we will get to those in, I think, week 5. But it's also, at the same time as I do this, cleaning up the list on the main screen so that when I do download those terms, I haven't got as much junk to sort through. So it just gives me a quick, rough and ready filter. Now, underneath the include-exclude is a very interesting thing that very few people seem to talk about, and that's Google's categories. Now, we're going to talk about categories a lot when we get to week 7, but Google has categorized every single keyword and every single page on the web that it's found. Now, most pages have multiple categories. If we were talking about display network at this point, now this is great for Paul, we can actually say, well, go and find all the pages in the first aid kit category and show my ads there. We'll talk about that in week 7. How this is useful for your keyword research, well, if you see categories there that have nothing to do with the products and services that you sell, it's a great way to find negative keywords. I'm trying to think of a better example than the one I've got on the screen because this is not a great example. Let's say you typed in the word cruise. If your starting point was cruise, you sell, I don't know, holidays on cruise ships. And if you saw in here there was a category that's called entertainment, you might click on that and see all of these Tom Cruise related terms, and that would be a mental trigger to yourself. Yes, I need lots of Tom Cruise and Suri Cruise and Katie Holmes or whatever her name is. All of those words might be good negative keywords for you. So the categories that show up are great places to go look for negative keywords. And if you do what I've done here, by the way, and highlight a particular category, then all the keywords on the right are going to change and just show you the keywords in that category. What you'll probably find, though, that isn't quite as useful as it sounds because most of the keywords will be the same in most categories. So they're saying, okay, people that are searching around this sort of stuff, it's pretty much the same list. I find it most useful for finding negative keywords. When I've got, what was I going to talk about here? I think I've just talked about those categories. I was going to talk about categories and highlighting categories. That's all right. I've covered that. Match types. Which match type should you use? You'll see there are 3 options over on the left-hand side. If I'm looking for general keyword ideas, then keep the tick next to broad. If, however, you want to get more precise detail about the search volume for a particular keyword and the CPC for that keyword, then flick into exact. And you'll see that the numbers change drastically. Something that might have 40,000 searches a month under broad might only have 235 searches a month under exact. So it is worth looking at those exact numbers so that you get a bit of a feel for the market. Is that going to affect the keywords that I pick? Maybe, maybe not, but probably not too much early on. As long as the keyword has some search volume, then it's probably okay. There's also an option there to find more like these. And effectively what that's doing is if you tick keywords in the main screen and then choose the more like these option, and here I had 4 keywords ticked, so it says, okay, you want more like the 4 that you've selected, the 4 that you ticked. It's essentially just the same as typing that keyword into the box up at the top. It's just saving you typing. So what it does is it then does a search again on those keywords that you've selected and show you more keyword ideas related to those. And I should have mentioned right at the beginning, make sure you do this when you're logged in to your AdWords account. It's called the external keyword tool, which it's a bizarre name, but it means that you can use it externally to Google AdWords. If you're not logged in, you can use this tool externally. You can tell Google are a bunch of geeks, aren't you? external keyword tool. It's best to use it when you're logged into your AdWords account because you'll see 800 or up to 800 keyword ideas rather than just 100. So log in first and then do this. You can group your keywords together. Have a go. What this will generally do is just break the keyword list into two. Those that are really similar to the keywords that you started with, your initial seed keywords in that box at the top, and those that are somewhat related, which you're probably not going to use as keywords. So generally we won't bother looking at this because I suppose maybe just from experience we know what's too broad a keyword, what's too far away from my bullseye keyword. But have a play with it. It might help you when you're going through for the first couple of times. And you can sort these keywords a couple of ways. By default, when you first use the tool, the keywords are going to be sorted by relevance, which can be very useful. And I'll talk about that when we get to the week on display network ads. But generally, I'll sort them by local monthly searches. That's entirely up to you, though. I don't, by the way, tend to look too much at approximate CPC. You know, the market is what the market is. Again, the better you get, the cheaper it gets. So I know that I'm probably going to be able to beat most players in the market in terms of my quality, in terms of my ad copy, in terms of my click-through rates. So I'm not too worried about what the cost per click is. I should say, that probably sounds a bit flippant. I try very, very hard to treat my clients' money like my own and not waste a single cent. But the market is what the market is. So you've got to pay the going rate. You are going to learn as you go. You are going to get better as you go, but you can't do anything magical. You know, there are very, very, I won't say no. Yeah, well, there are no 5-cent keywords left in competitive, profitable markets. All those people still teaching go find 5 and 10 cent keywords and go, you know, sell ebooks and make a mozza, run the other way. Because in a profitable market, I don't believe they exist anymore. Yes, we have clients paying 1 and 2 cents per keyword, but it's generally for brand terms, not for competitive, profitable, generic product terms. Okay, another way to use the tool, if you look up at the top, there are 2 places that you can start. You can either type in a word or phrase, or multiple words and phrases, 1 per line, or you can start with a website. So if you know who your competitors are, chuck in their URL up there. Don't put any words or phrases in the left box, just put the domain name of their homepage in the website box on the right and hit search. And you'll get a list of keywords that Google has found relating to their website. Very, very useful tool. Particularly once you've got 3 or 4 or 5 competitor URLs. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about competitor research in a couple of slides' time, so we'll leave that for now. But have a go with this. You can find some great results there and some great ideas that you didn't otherwise find. Okay, some other useful tools. I'm going to focus here mainly on Google Insights because I love it, and Keyword Spy. So Google Insights. Any questions at this point, James, or shall we keep cracking on?
No, we have just nice comments, you know, like nice, awesome, or didn't know about that. And you're covering a lot of the questions with your answers. I will just check in though. Just type into your chat pad, is the pace good? Are you up to speed? Bear in mind we're going to give you the PDF and the recording so you can review this at your own pace. Just give us some feedback. Good, yep, great, all good, perfect.
Yeah, in general, it's good to know if it's not too fast or too slow or too boring.
No, I think you're on a good mission here. There is one question. Do you automatically disregard low monthly searches?
No, definitely not. I will add them to my starting list and then manage from there. So again, we'll talk about this more when we get to ongoing management, but I'm going to manage using that 80-20 rule as my key guiding principle. I'm going to spend most of my time where I've got volume and where I've got data to work with. So I may chuck it in the account. If it ends up only getting 1 search a month, then I probably won't do a whole lot of optimizing for that particular ad group and that particular ad copy. because it just won't be worth it in the scheme of things. If it's got a low quality score, it'll probably get chopped out. If it's got low, really low impressions, it'll probably get chopped out after 3 to 6 months. We generally sort of go through every 6 months and delete everything with 0 impressions, just to keep the accounts fairly tidy. But from a starting point, yeah, chuck it in.
Had another question here, really interesting, and I know from our own experience on this. What about brand names?
Okay, it's a good one. Should you bid on particularly competitor brand names, I think is what the question's getting at. So, should you bid on your own brand name? Absolutely. We talked about this last week, and James shared the Search Engine Land article about this. Yes. One of our clients at the moment get about 95% of their leads through their brand name. So they're a brand new client. We haven't done a lot of playing with the account yet. We're going to go and get them a stack more leads on the display network, but they get most of their leads currently on their own brand name. So should you bid on a competitor brand name? Look, it's a grey area. Some people think it's a bad thing to do and bad juju. I think as long as you're not deliberately misleading the searcher, then I think it's absolutely fine to do, and morally and ethically I have no problem with it. Brand names tend to be very profitable keywords. If someone's searching for a brand by name, they're probably towards the bottom of the funnel. They're probably not in sort of general research mode. They're probably at the point where they're about to get the wallet out and spend some cash. You generally want to get in front of that person. If they're searching for a competitor by name, they either don't know you exist or they don't care, probably the former. So it's a bloody good time to get in front of them and show your point of difference, tell your story, and tell them why they should go with you and not that competitor. Now, I wouldn't go to the extent of saying don't buy from brand X in the ad, probably. I won't say never. But as long as you don't pretend to be brand X in your ad, you're not trying to trick people into clicking on your ad by being misleading, by buying a dodgy URL that looks a bit more like brand X. So as long as you're being you and you're telling your story and making the case for them dealing with you, then I think it's absolutely fine.
Is the brand name going to appear in the ad copy, Mike?
The competitor ad, generally not. But if you want bonus points, if it's worth it to you, if you think that there's lots of traffic there and you can profitably convert them, have a landing page that compares you to brand X. That way you're going to have brand X as a keyword in all the places that we want it to appear on that landing page, the URL, the title tag, the H1 tag, the description tag, all that good stuff. At that point, yeah, you might use brand X in the ad and say, see why we're better than. As long as you can back up that story, as long as you've got some proof that you are better than that person, then you might want to do it. Look, you may well get a cease and desist letter from their lawyers, but I reckon it's always better to beg for permission rather. Sorry, what is it? Beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission.
Yeah, that's right. I've had cease and desist letters. People wanting us to take a brand name out of a post and out of the metadata and the page name.
At which point we smile sweetly, say sorry, it was the search company, won't do it again, and we turn that ad group off. No harm done, no foul, and everyone's happy.
I guess we should point out here, if you're doing this for clients, you may want to check with them if they have any restrictions on that too, because we have encountered clients that like a franchise type situation where they expressly forbid the bidding of even brands within their own group. I
was going to say that particular client.
It's like they would love. So aside from Google's rules and then the legal rules about trademark use, you've still got sometimes internal policies that you need to be aware of with this particular question. We might move on.
Yeah. Okay, very good point. I'm not a trademark lawyer. I don't play one on TV, but be very careful around trademarked brand terms as well. And if it's trademarked, then almost certainly don't use it in your ad copy. But you could probably get away with bidding on that trademark. Just tread carefully, and if you get the cease and desist, probably better to desist. All right, Google Insights. So this is a tool that's quite similar to Google Trends if you've played with that, but it just gives some additional information which I find quite useful. So at the top there, we can enter search terms as per before, but over on the left you've got a compare by, so you can actually compare a search term in different locations or across different time ranges. Have a play with it. I'm not going to go into heaps of different examples with it here. I just find it's more of an interest thing than a keyword research thing, but have a play with it. It can be useful, particularly for that bullseye keyword term. So don't do this for every single keyword in your account, but for those ones that really, really matter, have a play with those. With the filter, top right, you're probably going to set that second box down to the main country that you're playing in, and I generally change that date range from 2004 to present to be the last 12 months, just to get cleaner data, because obviously the stuff that people were searching for in 2004, it's not the same way that we search these days. People actually know how to use Google these days. It's changed dramatically. And Paul, don't worry about this massively declining graph. It's not as bad as it seems. All right, the categories section, you'll notice, is there again. You'll notice how important this is to Google. And again, if you start seeing categories in there that you think, why is that category showing up for this keyword? Dig into it. It's probably a good place to find negative keywords. If you scroll down the screen, you'll find the regional interest area. And the reason I put this slide up is just to make a point. This is not saying that more people search for first aid kits in Australia than New Zealand, and more people there than South Africa, and more people there than the UK or the States. This data has been normalized. So what it's effectively saying is, more people, think of it this way, more people search for first aid kits than normal in that country. So more people, so assuming that Australia is our benchmark now, then Google compares everything to that. So it's not saying that there is more volume in South Africa than the US, because that's clearly not going to be the case, but it is saying that the average amount of searching for this particular term, more people are searching for it in South Africa than normal compared to the search patterns in the US.
Could it be that they have different names for these things in other countries?
Definitely, and you'll see
like
that.
Emergency kits?
Survival kits, medical kits, all those sorts of things. And so, yeah, scrolling down here, these top searches, you'll see lots of other ideas. So it's often very good to compare, go back to that initial screen, add those 3 or 4 different search terms up the top there, and then dig into individual countries. Because yes, in the States in particular, compared to say Australia and the UK tend to be very similar, but the States, you know, they just like to spell everything differently. Bless you guys. So yes, they can use very, very different terms. That's a good point. Top searches is useful for your keyword research, for digging into finding other ways that people talk about the products and services. And then over on the bottom right of the screen, you'll see this rising searches, which is really useful. This is going to give you an indication if particular phrases are getting used a lot more recently. And if you see breakout in here, it's not on this particular example, but if you see one that says breakout, that's the equivalent of plus 5,000% or more. So that's really where people have probably only just started searching on that term, but they're searching it on really high volume, probably, certainly much, much, much higher volume than they used to. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you see breakout, it's probably a good keyword to have in your account. So that's the Insights tool. The Ad Preview tool, and you can find this by just going to Google and typing Ad Preview tool. That's the easiest way. But again, use this when you're signed into your account. This lets you see ads that are running in other parts of the world. Now, there are other ways to do this. Dave over in Redfly in Ireland has a great little Firefox add-on called Google Global that sort of does this, but this is probably a better way to do it, and certainly an easier way to do it. So go to Ad Preview tool, sign in, chuck in the phrase that you want to go research, change the domain. In this case, I've changed it from .com.au to .com because I want to see what's happening in the States. And I tend to pick on a fairly large city in the States. I might pick maybe San Francisco or Chicago, cities where I know that they're sort of not Midwest, and cities where there's probably going to be a fairly high number of smart advertisers. So generally around the edges. So maybe Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, maybe New York. And I tend to keep devices desktop or laptop again. And then literally you get to see what ads are running in other places. Now obviously we're going to talk about this next week when we talk about ad copy, but just this will often give you some ideas, the words that people use in their ads, it might give you some ideas, but also these related searches underneath the premium ads there, the yellow box, you can see the related searches for first aid kits. I should have a screenshot of that anyway. We used to have this wonderful thing called the Wonder Wheel, which would show you how keyword themes related to each other. That's gone now, but you can still get related searches. And you get that by going to more search tools over on the left-hand side of Google. I haven't got a screenshot of that, apologies, but related searches is another good place to go look for ideas. Your Google Analytics account. Obviously, if you're already running a website, if you have been for some time, then you can go into your Analytics account. You want to go to the Traffic Sources report over on the left, and then the Keywords report. And you'll see underneath where it says Search sent 6,000 total visits, show non-paid versus paid. If you click on non-paid, then that's going to show you just the organic traffic, the organic keywords that are already sending you traffic. Now, the caveat here obviously is if you don't rank for it, then you're probably not going to find it in the logs. You know, if someone's typing in a phrase, but your website is on page 12 of Google, they're unlikely to click on the link to your site when they've been searching for that particular term to come through to your site, and so that keyword isn't going to show up in your analytics report. So it's one of those you don't know what you don't know things. So don't rely on this solely. Some people will swear by their analytics logs and say that you should only bid on the keywords that are in there. But obviously, if you don't rank for that, you're not going to find the keyword in there. So it can be a useful addition, but don't rely on it solely. Okay, spy tools. So a few years ago, a product called Google Cache Detective came out. And it was all about spying on competitors, having a look at their ads, reverse engineering their keyword lists and even the structure of their accounts to some extent, so that you could start by bidding with the exact same copy that you could see that they had been bidding on for a while. Therefore, the assumption was that it was profitable, and so it sort of gave you a big head start. Didn't quite work as advertised, but it is certainly worth having a look at what your competitors are doing, obviously both from a paid standpoint and an organic standpoint. So, Keyword Spy, I found to be one of there's lots of tools that do this. I just like the results that we get from this better than a lot of the other ones that we've tried. So this tends to be the only spy tool that we use on a day-to-day basis these days, but SpyFu is very good, Word Tracker are very good, and there are heaps and heaps of others. So you come in here and you can either start generally with a domain name or a particular keyword, even a destination URL, and you can even type in an ad that you've seen and tell the spy tool to go find that ad and tell you more information about it. But generally we'll start with a domain or a keyword. So an example here, I've used the keyword first aid kit, and it has wandered off and found me 1,000 related keywords, 510 similar keywords, and told me that there's 152 PPC competitors. And now I can dig into any one of those reports and find out more information. So I might want to have a look at that list of PPC competitors, and you can see that some of them have got huge, huge numbers of keywords. not particularly useful. If newegg.com down there has 1.1 million keywords, I probably don't want to dig into that. I probably am not going to sift through 1.1 million keywords to find a few that are related to, in this case, first aid kits. So I'm probably going to try and find some ones, maybe like the one underneath at the firstaidstore.com, 73 keywords, or firstaidsupplies.com, 960 keywords. So I click on that, dig in a bit further, and find those 960 keywords that the tool believes they are currently bidding on. Now, this data is far, far from perfect. You know, you've got things like budget, you've got things like ad rank, you've got impression share, you've got changing bids, you've got changing competitors. I don't believe any tool is going to perfectly reverse engineer any account. And obviously you've got keyword match type. You know, when we run this tool for Australian competitors, if an Australian competitor is bidding on the broad match term plumber and the tool runs the keyword London plumber or New York plumber, the ad might possibly, if they're bidding too much and a few other things have gone wrong, their ad might actually show up, at which point this tool is going to tell me that that competitor is bidding on the term London plumber and New York plumber, which clearly they wouldn't be. So take it with a pinch of salt. How we have got around that, how we've got some cleaner data out of this is, we'll tell you what, we'll do this. For the guys in Basecamp, we'll do this for you. Unadvertised bonus coming up. So we'll find 3 or 4 or 5 competitors and we'll run them all through the tool. And we'll find their list of PPC keywords and their list of organic keywords for each of those, let's say, 4 competitors. So I've now got 8 lists of keywords with me so far. I've got PPC and organic for each of my 4 competitors. So you've got 8 different lists. What we'll then do is chuck all of those 8 lists in a heap and we'll count the number of times that each search term shows up. If a search term were going to show up 8 times out of those 8 possible lists, it's a keyword that it's obviously very important to all of those competitors. At which point, probably bloody important to me too. And so then we'll dedupe that list, deduplicate that list, and then we'll sort them by that count of how many lists they appeared in. All the 8s, then all the 7s, all the 6s, all the 5s. If it only appears in 1 or 2 out of those 8 possible lists, it's probably junk. It's probably some random term that managed, like preparedness down here, number 7. I'm probably not going to bid on that. If it shows up on lots of those 8 possible lists, then maybe I am, but if it only shows up on 1 or 2, I'm probably not. So you rank them all, dedupe them, sort them by that, and that gives you a really good starting point. It can be a long list, it can take a while to sort through, but here's the deal. In Basecamp, we'll set this up, I'll do it after the call, I'll tell you what I need from you and the format I need you to send it, but I'll get you to send an email to one of my staff and it will have a list of, let's say, somewhere between 3 and 6, but a maximum please of 6 competitors, otherwise they're going to be there for days. Give us that list of competitors and we'll send you back that list of filtered and sorted keywords. It will save you buying the tool and save you having to figure out how to use it. But it can give you a really, really good starting point. So find your competitors using the preview tool. Let's do that. There's going to be a few things there that could potentially go wrong. We'll sort that out as we go. Word Tracker, I'm not going to talk too much about it other than to say, look, it is another useful tool. Certainly worth a go with the free 7-day trial, which you'll find on their homepage, or at least the keyword tab on the homepage. But again, you don't need to buy these tools. The Google Keyword Tool will get you most of the way, particularly with your first account. If you try this tool and you decide you like it, or you like it better than Keyword Spy, or you like it better than the other tools, by all means go for it, particularly if you're doing this for clients. If you're only doing this for yourself, you probably don't need to buy any of these tools. And a couple of other examples. Now, we talked about this last week, so I won't spend too much time on it, especially given the time. But Amazon, great place to go and have a think about keywords. Search for books on your topic, and that second one there, that first aid for the whatever it says, I can click on that book and search inside that book. So I can look at the table of contents, I can look at the index, I can look at the back cover. There's probably some keyword ideas there. And I can also go and read those customer reviews. And again, this is something that we'll talk about next week, because I think the language in there is fantastic for thinking about ad copy, more so than keyword research. But sometimes you can find ideas for additional keywords in there as well. All right, action steps. It is that time of the evening again. So, go build your starting list of keywords. Forget trying to make it perfect. Forget building a list of thousands and thousands. 50 to 200, using those tools that we've outlined. Get them in Excel, and that's your starting point. Find some competitors and reverse engineer them. See what they're bidding on. Yes, you can use paid tools for that, but you can also use the ad preview tool. Do lots of competitor ads show up for your important keyword phrases in the preview tool. If it's an important phrase to your competitors, it's probably an important phrase for you. And if you want to use a paid tool to reverse engineer them, you can, you don't have to. For those of you in Basecamp, send me that list, and again, I'll put a note in Basecamp later on to tell you exactly how to do that. And for bonus points this week, I want you to go and download AdWords Editor. So just Google AdWords Editor. There's a version for PC, there's a version for Mac. Download the version that makes sense for you. And we'll talk about that more as we go, particularly week 4 when we get to building the campaign. You can download it, install it, have a play with it for now if you like, but you don't need to. We're not going to build the campaign until week 4. The most important thing that you finish this week with is an Excel sheet of 50 to 200 keywords. More if you want to go crazy, less if you can't be bothered, but somewhere around that number. And I think we are done. Next week, we will talk about writing ads, and unless we have some burning questions, then we are good to go. We're done.
I just have one question, Mike. You talked about getting those 8 groups and then deduping and filtering, looking for the 8. How do you do that? Is that this week or another time?
Yeah, we'll do that this week. So for the guys in Basecamp, we'll do it for you. You can either go and buy Keywords Buy if you listen to this and you don't have access to the Basecamp and Premium group. But for those guys, go and find those competitors using the ad preview tool. So chuck a few different keywords into the preview tool. Find competitors that show up often, preferably on the right-hand side, preferably on the paid side, but also organic competitors that show up often. Your competitors that are ranking really well for your top keywords, because we'll also get their list of organic keywords from that tool. Send us that list of 3 to 6 big competitors. And it's really about finding the big competitors, because that's where we'll find the most data for. And then we'll turn that into that sorted, deduped list and send it back to you.
Nice. Okay, thank you. All right, folks. Well, we've had another very good session. We've got homework to do, and I can see that we're starting to build the plan. So I'm just going to ask you if you could type a response to tonight's training into the chat pad. Yep. By the way, a first aid kit was sold on the call tonight, so that's a good sign. Over-delivered, excellent. Thank you very much. They like the ad that you've got there on your screen. Great information, very good, thank you. Someone asked if they didn't have their question answered about competitor brand name terms. I thought we were pretty comprehensive on that. Is there a chance that we didn't cover that?
You want to give me a more specific example of whoever's asking that?
Yeah, if you could type that question again, because I thought we covered it really well. But anyway, unless maybe it was different. Very good, very good. Cheers, thank you. So just waiting for that question to be retyped, and then we'll be done. I also have Keyword Spy, Mike, and the paid version. It's a great tool if you're building out keyword lists.
It is. I just
okay.
Quality of the data is pretty good.
Okay. Here was the brand question was, are there going to be quality score issues? But you did actually say put it on your page, so I thought that it was answered. Do you have anything different to add?
Well, I suppose that the quick and easy way to do that would be just to start with it anyway, have it in its own ad group, write an ad without that competitor brand in the ad, and send it to your normal landing page is the quick way to start. If you have quality score issues, and if it's a really important keyword to you, then go the extra step and build that competitor comparison landing page as we described. If it's not that important to you, if the search volume isn't there, if your early results aren't great and you got a quality score of 3 or lower, then just can it, delete the keyword and get it out of the account.
Now, I will ask, there's one other question, and this is basically because we, a lot of us are using SEMrush for our SEO stuff and keyword mining and seeing what we rank for and stuff. I've been training on that a lot, so a lot of people on the call are familiar with it. Have you tried that for the AdWords side of it, Mike? Do you have any experience with it?
I actually haven't, no. I did sit behind Steve Ovens the other day while he was playing with it, and I watched him use it. I haven't used it from a PPC keyword research side of things. I will go and have a play with it this weekend, and I'll report back. Yeah,
well, look, I've got the paid version of both, so I love SEMrush, especially for our keyword research and SEO stuff, which will really help with landing pages. But I do see them as quite similar tools. So if Mike says Keyword Spy is good, then that's a good sign. I'm sure we'll come back to you with some ideas during the week as well. But you don't have to go and buy a subscription if you're in the base camp for either of those, because we've got access to them. And if you wait within the next week, we'll let you know if there's any differences, or if we have preferences there from the AdWords side. Do you still use Market Samurai?
Yeah, I do. A little. I mean, it's obviously pulling data from the Google Keyword tool. So in terms of what we're talking about tonight, it's essentially the same data. I don't do any SEO, bear that in mind. So I think Samurai was designed as more of an SEO research tool, and Ben, Eugene, forgive me if I've got that wrong, but that's my understanding. It's about finding those initial keywords and then doing all the funky stuff that they do with that in terms of finding out that SEO value and all of the other stats that they give you, and then tracking those keywords and seeing where your competitors rank and giving you all of that great data that it gives. So yes, we do use it. I particularly use it when I'm consulting to clients and trying to show them just how terrible their website is in the scheme of things and how badly it stacks up to their competitors. But as far as keyword research goes, I think essentially what we've covered tonight with the Google Keyword tool particularly gives you the same outcome. Yep,
I'm the same as you. We pretty much use the Google Keyword tool, SEMrush and Keyword Spy for our own team. But, all right, well, thanks everybody. Been great to catch up. Same time, same channel next week.